What the Heck's your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 glory from the top of the podium. Today, I'm your host, Phil, and joining me, two of my fellow compatriots at Adepticon. We've got Brian and Skylar. How you doing, guys?
What's up, what's up?
Doing pretty good. You?
Hey, feeling pretty jazzed coming back from Adepticon. It was a very fun time. Got to play a whole bunch of Underworlds. Excited to talk about it. That is going to be our topic for today. We're going to, as promised, we're going to give a quick recap of how our tournament went, how we played, as we said we would when we did our sort of path to Adepticon. For a little bit of context, we are recording. Today is March 28th. Adepticon's just wrapped a couple of days ago. And we don't have a ton of other news since Adepticon, obviously, because they dropped a whole bunch of news on us. For those who haven't actually seen what I'm talking about, we know our next box set, the second, or the, well, new season, second half of the season, however we want to call it, is coming for Gnarlwood. It's going to be called Weird Hollow. So something to keep watch out there. But we will save some of that for another time, or potentially later today if we get the time for it. But before we start breaking down Adepticon and everything that we talked about at the tournament, how about some community shout-outs? Skylar, Brian, either of you have anything from the community you want to shout out?
Well, shout out to also Adepticon attendees, the Dice Heroes. They're a gamer group based out of Chicago, Illinois. Basically, they do gaming for good. They organize and participate in gaming events benefiting children's hospitals and the Children's Miracle Network. So they put on events, and a lot of their proceeds go to just donated straight to children's hospitals through a program called Extra Life. They also some of their events that they put on, they have like fun little rules where you can, by donating, you can get rerolls in your events, as well as you can just buy challenge coins like Skylar and I bought, and fun events, and goes to a good cause. So if you see a con near you and an event ran by the Dice Heroes, you know it's going to a good cause.
Yeah, definitely. And it's worth shouting out. They ran an Underworlds event at Adepticon. It was our Wednesday night tournament. So it was a little interesting. They started us off 7 p.m. It was about the same time as the GW preview. So there was a little bit of competition for attendance there, but we had a pretty good turnout. It was about 20 people. And we played until 1:30 in the morning, which was something. And our very own Davey managed to come out on top in that tournament. It was pretty fun. Just played a quick, I say quick, but 3 rounds. It was really well done. It was a nice event. And like you said, all the proceeds of registration went to charity, which is super awesome that they were able to do that.
Yeah, I was really torn between going to participate in that and going to the preview. Josh and I ultimately went to the preview, wanted to get in on the hype, and then immediately raced over to see you guys. And you were after round 1 going into, was it round 1 or round 2 that we found you in?
You probably saw us in round 2.
I believe so, yeah.
But not very far in, I don't think. They were doing 2-hour rounds, so we had quite a while for each round.
Being a participant during some of the games, so we were right next to the preview. We could just hear the roaring energy coming from there. And we're like, my opponent and I were looking at each other, and it was like, man, what are we missing out?
Well, if you want to know what you're missing out on, go check it out on Warhammer Community. But yeah, it was every so often you just get this thunderous roar coming from through the wall. They'd this big ballroom at the convention center, and they split the room with one of those big dividing walls, and so every so often we just get this big roar. It's like, okay, everybody's excited. Must be something cool. So another community shout out that I wanted to mention, and related to the new announcements. So Flaviuz of Monkey's Hex Pod, not a podcast, blog. Yes, words. Did another board analysis article, and this one was specifically for the two boards that we could see in the preview article for Weird Hollow, which I don't know if folks out there who are listening have actually looked too closely at the images on those articles from the Warhammer community. They are very low resolution, so I don't quite know how he was able to pick out all the starting hexes and everything, but kudos to him for being able to manage that and give some cool analysis of who might like those boards and what they might be good for. They both looked like pretty flexible boards, which is cool. And we had the first printed snare hex, which is something to look forward to.
And I recently saw some chatter online about how his articles are written in a plural. And people wanted to know, like, who's your co-collaborator? And the answer is it's the monkey.
Who else would it be?
It's Flaviuz and the monkey.
And the monkey. So he's done a whole series of these board analysis things, and for anybody who doesn't pay really close attention to board setup and token placement, that is one very good way to level up your game. So if you're looking for that next step to take, you can go check out his article. I think WathLab has had some that are relatively dated at this point, but still are out there on the internet. So shout out to any of this board analysis stuff. It's very cool. You can definitely have some I say a lot of time thinking about how you need to deploy and set up hexes.
Yeah, to echo what Phil said, if you want to up your game, your board game, Flaviuz's articles are a must read. He is a board expert.
Yes, indeed. But I think that'll do it for community shoutouts. Unless you guys have anything else, any secret shoutouts up your sleeves that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I'd like to sneak in with a shout out to the Battle Mallet blog. The guys over there recently threw together a buyer's guide in the spirit of having something that can be shared around to help people get started. When they're staring down all of the history of the game, what's relevant to them right now, what should they start purchasing, and what does that initial commitment kind of look like. So I recommend not only that article, but we've highlighted this before. They also have a Nemesis deck library that they host on their blog, and they put a ton of work into that, and have also offered to feature our decks from Adepticon, so you can find those there as well.
Yeah, awesome. It's definitely nice to have a concise online resource for finding pre-constructed decks if you are new to deck building, even in the Nemesis format where there's not as many cards that you need to worry about. So having a full library for every single warband, super handy. Go check those guys out. They also have plenty of content for Nemesis as a format. So if you're interested in learning more about the Nemesis format, they are a good resource. So go check those stuff out as well. I don't think we need to cover our hobby section here, as I don't imagine you boys have had a whole lot of time to do hobbying since we got back from Adepticon. So let's jump right in to our main topic. We're going to do a quick Adepticon recap. So before we get in too much, I just want to make clear sort of what the tournament ended up being. So the tournament was scheduled to be a 2-day tournament. There was going to be a top 32 cut because the original tournament was scheduled to have upwards of 120 some players. And so it was like top quarter. We definitely didn't have that many people. And because of that, there was some initial confusion, I guess I would say, about how the tournament was going to be run. But ultimately what happened is that there was a day 2 cut for the top 8 of our 30 28 players who actually ended up playing the tournament. And they used total tournament points to determine who won. There was never a single elimination bracket style end to the tournament. So we didn't truly know who was on top at any one time, although you could use some of the match results to kind of math it out if you were interested. So to give that sort of backdrop of what did this tournament look like, let's then rewind going into the tournament. What were your decks, and what were your expectations and feelings about what you thought you might face in this meta? Skylar, let's start with you.
All right. So I played my Headcrackers Fort Crackers deck, which was the Mad Mob paired with Fearsome Fortress. Going into Adepticon, I thought that this was a particularly strong pairing, and really just wanted to play Mad Mob. They're a favorite of mine, and actually played them at Adepticon the previous year in the championship setting of the Harrow Deep meta at the time, end of Harrow Deep. So guilty for bringing them 2 years in a row. But when Fearsome Fortress came out, I was immediately inspired to make this deck because with the Surges, Bold Sortie, and Earthworks, they become reliable Surges that I can score on not just the first round, but the first activation of the game as a result of the pushes that I can provide Daco and Wallop. And then with the Fearsome Fortress token placement at the beginning, it really reemphasizes the ability to capitalize on their initial push, giving them that landing pad. So I just was already super familiar with the strength of Headcracker, and I wanted to be able to maximize that 3 glory primacy reward. They've got a particularly powerful and third end phase too in Great Hunters, where it's got flexibility. It's a hybrid third end phase, which you love to see, where you either have 1 or fewer enemies still remaining on the board, and that scores all on its own, or you are on the enemy territory with all of your surviving fighters and you have the primacy. So there's, arguably 6 points right there kind of baked in with that third end phase and primacy, and hopefully being the one that can control primacy. And then having the reliable start in the Surges were just reasons why I thought this was going to be a powerful scoring deck. And then as far as like the field and my expectations, I definitely expected to see more Gnarl Spirit pack than we did, and I definitely didn't expect to end up against both of the GSP players in the field. Thank you, random Swiss pairings. But I was one of the things I thought I'd be able to get through was other elite warbands that were out there. I thought I'd be able to control primacy in those matchups a little better. I had a very hard time actually taking fighters down in this particular tournament, especially day 2. Day 2, I suppose it's kind of getting ahead of myself in the spoilers category. I actually didn't take a single game on day 2, and my first opponent.
I'm sorry.
My first opponent of the tournament, after we had played our series, he actually went to our Discord and shouted out, Skylar's at Adepticon or something at the Adepticon Grand Clash. Go find him. He can't roll crits. Something along those lines.
Foreboding statement indeed.
Yeah, and that's how the start of the tournament was and the end of the tournament for me. There was a sweet spot in the middle where I was allowed to have some exciting dice, but for the most part, they abandoned me. kind of all over the board there. But I'm gonna pass the torch. Brian, what was your deck, and what were your expectations?
I'm one of those Gnarl Spirit guys. I
Yeah.
knew that Gnarl Spirit was going to be there, and I embraced the Gnarlism. I was struggling through the season to try and make something else work, something that I enjoyed, and I wasn't able to make that happen. So I kind of went with what was good. And post the beta rule, I thought that GSP, while being nerfed, was still strong. Kind of feel that they're still a little too strong, but at the same time, I had a kind of a neat painting idea, so I kind of went with it for that reason. But I just went in the classic Gnarl Spirit pack and Tooth and Claw.
Yeah. Tell folks a little bit about that. I suppose we should have covered that maybe as your hobby, since you painted up a new warband for this tournament. You want to just give folks a quick rundown of what you did?
Yeah, so on a lot of their art, it features them in their beast mode with their skulls and kind of like animal spirits aflame in like red spirit, ether, mist, or whatever. So I kind of wanted to replicate that on the models. Tall order, trying to make ghostly ethereal heads on top of the barbarians, but I kind of used what was already given to me and made a few conversions. So Goral had like this big, strong gorilla bear type skull on it in a lot of his art. So I put a orc skull on top of him, not with the jaw because he already has the jaw around his neck, but kind of put that on top of his head like a hat. Probably not as good a work as I could have done, but and then for Kira, she's the only other bear head one. I used this cool demon skull mask from like I think Kingdom Death. Thank you, Skylar, and put that on her face. That one I think turned out really well. I was really happy with that one, and so I just painted them up like barbarians to sort of suit my Age of Sigmar army and the marauders that I have, and then painted the skulls on top of their faces and heads like Lupin's mask and Sarakar's mask as like this bright red with vibrant orange kind of fiery edges. Did it look ethereal? Not really, but it was very eye-catching. So I was kind of happy, at least with that much of it. I did give them also like fiery eyeballs and out of their mouths as though they're like bursting with power, and that kind of like, I don't know, powerful cartoon style. But I also stepped it up and gave them a display base. So I actually had just this easy oval with a nice rim. What is it? Forget the wood shop tool, my wood shop class from high school. But the molding around the side of it to give it a nice edge, big black base around, or big black base trim around that, and then gave them like a rocky cork based deserty, dry, arid desert kind of terrain to be in. I even, while I was driving around at work, I saw some bushes and plucked some burrs and spiky plants and added that into the terrain to give it this hostile vegetation look. So I was really proud of that.
Yeah, I think it landed very well. I thought it was very well done.
Thank you.
I do think if you weren't going up against Kyle Dalton, for folks who maybe know him by his online moniker of Pale King Hobby,
definitely check it out on Instagram. Lots of great painting on there. But yeah, he's now the 3-time.
Yeah, 3-time best painted champion and also a multi-entrant Golden Demon contestant. So I mean, some real stiff competition there. So, but yeah, definitely check his stuff out. So you're looking aggro. What were you feeling about what you were expecting to see in the tournament as far as the field goes?
It was largely kind of what we expected. We did a bit of a preview with our Adepticon expectations and what the meta might look like. I think Hexbanes, GSB, Headcrackers, Mad Mob were all prevalent callouts. I can't remember if there was like a wild card that we anticipated, but it was also, I think, a good spread there. There were, I think, 2 Rippas, 2 GSP, 2 Headcrackers, and 2 Hexbanes.
Yep.
Was there a triple of anything?
There were 2 or 3 gore chosen.
Yeah. Yes, but I don't remember the exact breakdown.
There was also 2 worm spat, which I definitely did not expect.
Both of those were there for the painting, though. Those guys brought it. One of them being Kyle Dalton.
Yeah, and they did play well too. There was one chosen Axis player, pretty crazy.
The legend.
Yeah, there's multiple Skittershanks players. Mournflight, which I think we had maybe called as like one that would probably show up, just because they're always pretty solid, even if you're not seeing them as much lately.
Yeah, I think he got second in the Dice Heroes tournament with Davey.
Yes, he did. Went undefeated.
I think it was Damien from Canada. Shout out.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say our guesses about the meta being fairly aggressive were correct. I know personally, so I was, playing my Daring Delvers Stalkers, and
you were playing the fringe meta.
The very fringe hold objectives in this extremely aggro meta. I definitely want to, shout out everybody in our Discord community and Davey for sort of talking me into sticking with them, despite having some pretty bad practice matches before we went down. Because I was like one loss away from deciding that, like, no, this wasn't going to work. My feelings about the meta were basically like, I'm just going to get shredded because I've got all these 2-wound fighters. This isn't going to work. It's just going to be really bad. But I'm very glad I stuck with it. The deck had a 19 glory objective deck, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And so the goal was basically, I'm just going to outscore, like, I'm just going to foot race here, and I'm just going to try and outscore the aggro players and try and just get enough glory that even if they kill all my skinks, it doesn't matter. But that is something we can talk about here as we start talking the match overviews. So
I'm so happy you brought skinks.
After the fact, I was very happy I did too, mostly because they're my favorite warband, and I hadn't played them in a tournament really. Because I was always feeling like they were just not quite fitting the meta and that they weren't going to stand up on their own. But feel good about the choice now.
Well, I definitely think they aren't fitting the meta, but you certainly made them stand.
They stood out. I think I surprised a number of people, myself included. So for the match overview, we've got effectively a 7-round tournament. Like I said, we had this top cut, but because we went with total tournament points, it was kind of like day 2 was a continuation of the first day, except that there was fewer potential matchups. So we'll just give a brief overview of everything that we faced and some of the highlights there, and then we can kind of talk through some of what we learned in those matchups. So Brian, how about you start us off this time about who all your opponents were and maybe some of the highlights?
Yeah, so day 1, we played 4 games. I started off going up against Blake from the Art of War. He was in his Art of War jersey, so I was like, uh-oh. But I was in my Tundra Tactics jersey, so he was like, "Who? Oh, you know those guys?" I was like, "Yeah, but no." And and he's like, "Yeah, it's all right. I just started out Underworlds yesterday." I was like, "Oh." But you're Art of War guy, so I'm not gonna pretend like you don't know what you're doing or you're gonna catch on quick. He was playing Hexbanes, and game 1 started out kind of as a little bit of a tutorial. Like I was making sure he was moving his dogs around, making sure he was using Amos's support, helping out with a lot of the rules. He was missing a lot of the price of victory, and it's a tournament, so like, you know, I'd remind him once or twice, but if he kept misremembering, then you know, I didn't like tell him every time. But it was like after the game, he's like, so what should I do differently, because I did win the first one. I was like, price of victory, remember that, price of victory. And I was like, he kept getting better at remembering the dogs and stuff, so I didn't have to remind him each time. Game 2 completely changed, like completely caught on. And I lost 9-11, and so we went to game 3, and again he was tightening it down even harder, and it was just like, God, these Art of War guys learn quick. But I did pull out the victory 8-6 against his Hexbanes for a final 33-20 for glory differential.
So for those who aren't familiar, what's the Art of War?
So they are a professional Warhammer competitor team. So they have their own Discord and Patreon. They provide courses and tutoring to players in Age of Sigmar, 40K, I believe, Kill Team. And so they play in all kinds of game systems, and they're like, well, this is the competitive game, so I wanted to see what Underworlds is about. And they're like, it's a really tight game system. So they actually had Blake and another one of his friends were playing in the tournament, and they're just like, the game system's really good, the models are sick, and so they were really jazzed about it. And I think everybody walked away from the preview excited for the next season too. So he just threw these guys together, and he learned quick. It was amazing.
Yes,
great opponent too. Like
absolutely.
So then my game 2 was against Jesse P. I remember him from last year, but I didn't get the pleasure of playing against him. I think he played Ripa's last year as well. And so Ripa's into Gnarl Spirit, all aggro all day. It was a nail biter. But the dice went heavily in my favor. Round 1, 10-0. I had him tabled first activation of round 2 because he was like, do I go first or do I go second? And I'm sitting there with a +1 dice upgrade, +1 damage upgrade, and Kira's in beast mode, hidden behind a wall of my dudes. And if he went first, then I was going to throw those upgrades on her. She was going to whip around the corner and go scything into 3 wolves. And that's exactly what she did.
Oh, no.
Nuked them. Or maybe I think I killed Ripa round 1, and she nuked the remaining 2 there. So 10-0 that game. And then the next game was much more sporting. A very much more nail biter game, jockeying for position and getting those kills, and a narrow victory there, 11-9. So really good game there. Really great opponent there. Game 3 was against you, Phil, and your lizards. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm just going to nom on some 2 health lizards. This is going to be great. Nope.
Not so much.
I don't remember if it was game 1 or game 2, but I couldn't seem to get the kills flowing. I think game 2 I had all but Clacktrock dead, but your just glory scoring was so fast I couldn't keep up, and my kills weren't stifling you quick enough. So it was game 1, 11-19. Any thoughts from the first game?
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly just a situation of like trying to do some damage mitigation, basically, where it was like, I need to be able to be scoring passively as best I can without giving up some easy attacks. There were some crucial attacks from Goral, I remember, that didn't land, which gave me opportunities to sort of continue to position and score more glory while you had to wait out these charged fighters. I was able to keep Kira from getting scything attacks, which I felt like was the main threat to my warband. So I was playing around that probably more than anything else. because I knew that if it went off would probably mean that I lose more than one fighter at a go. And yeah, like you mentioned, my game plan was essentially I just need to score enough glory that he can't catch up, because with stuff like the great plan, you have these turns where all of a sudden you score 3 end phase for 7 glory, and it's like, all right, and I just ran away with this. Do you have enough to score where you can get up to 19, 20 glory? And for me anyway, thankfully you did not.
No, my deck relies on kill surges, and then the end phase is usually whether or not those oaths were met, or if I am surrounded by or mixed up in you, and you were very skittish and dodging away, and it was hard to close ranks with you. And when I did, I often whiffed. So I was still able to score some glory, but I think game 2, it was like I finally got some lizards dead. It was maybe just Clacktrock and one more alive, but you were already ahead at 20. I was still able to score well to 16, but not enough to close.
Yep.
So game 4, final game of day 1, Michael and his worm spat. I learned through our game, I'll be honest here, it was not a dice sporting match between me and his worm spat. I don't think he made a single significant defense save, and there was no damage mitigation whatsoever. So worm spat didn't have their tank ability working for him. But through our match, I learned that this is the same infamous Michael that gave Davey his infamous Annihilation loss at his first Adepticon. So it's poetic, because last year, my first game of Adepticon, I met a similar fate of an Annihilation loss to another participant in this year's event. So that was great to catch up with him and see how far back him and Davey have been crossing paths at events. But like I said, I did take the victory here, 12-0 and then 12-2. So the worm spat saves were not helping him, and it was the dice were just turned off this match for him. So sorry, Michael.
Better luck next year, right?
Yeah.
I think this is maybe a good time to mention that to this point, it sounds like you've had 3 matches where dice being hot or cold on one side or the other was a significant factor in how the game actually turned out.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we can analyze it more later, but it's an interesting part of having an aggro meta, isn't it? Where your whole deck sort of hinges on whether your dice are going to roll well or not. And if they roll absolutely horribly, everything kind of falls apart.
Yeah, and a lot of the strategy is to try and mitigate the dice. The Gnarl Spirit pack brings a lot of tools for +1 dice or rerolls and getting Cleaver and Snare with Tooth and Claw. There's ways to mitigate that, but sometimes when you just don't roll any successes, there's not much else you can do. And especially when you need that seed glory to get the ball rolling, to get upgrades to mitigate those dice. When you just can't get that first kill, sometimes you're starved.
Absolutely.
Sometimes dice be dice be dice.
Yeah. Sometimes dice be dice.
Yeah, you roll 3 hammers, all swords.
Yeah. So then, Skylar, you sound excited. What happened for you in day 1?
So, jumping actually back a little earlier than my day 1, I want to shout out some of my opponents from Dice Heroes real quick.
Sure.
For Dice Heroes, I ran Scase the Wild Hunt because I couldn't not. A charity tournament sounded like a perfect opportunity to go rep one of my favorites. And I got to play against, I really hope I got these names right, because we had paper sheets that we were using to track.
We sure were.
And I really thought that paper sheet was going home with me, and it did not. So my first two opponents of the day was a couple that flew in from, I believe, Oklahoma City, if I'm remembering correctly. So was really excited to see them there. And that is the App Keys. So shout out to Liz. I definitely remember your name. Your husband, I believe his name was Colin. If you're listening, pretty sure I nailed that. And there was a Sons of Elmorn team repped by Liz, and she was an incredible opponent. She was actually rocking a Rivals list versus my Skaith's plus Daring Delvers combo, and she beat me 0-2. So afterwards, I had to go check with my teammates to make sure that they were still all right with me being on the podcast.
We still have to meet about that.
Because it was Sons of Elmorn Rivals, and she played them expertly. I think that I wouldn't have stood a chance at all if she had any pairing mixed in there. She was just incredibly skilled as a player. Her husband was rocking Colin, yes, was rocking Storm of... No, I'm sorry. Zendire's Truth Seekers. Yeah, absolutely. And he was one of the most enthusiastic opponents I've ever played against. It was memorable in that sense because every turn involved a grudge match of characters charging in at me. I definitely killed Talos a few times and announced myself a birderer. This was the type of opponent that takes that sort of thing personally, and made sure that the Zandire's True Seeker with the hammer punished me greatly. Like we went into round 2, I didn't have anybody dead, and then all of a sudden 3 of my hunters were down. I was just like, what's going on?
I got a shout out that he had used a chrome pen or like some sort of chrome paint used for like model cars to highlight the metals on his True Seekers, and it was like sometimes that paint, like at chrome paint, is really difficult to actually like get a true chrome effect, and on those little pieces on the True Seekers, it like really made those glow, like because it was like a mirror. It looks stunning. Crazy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he used it to highlight like all the edges of the armor as if it was trimmed in chrome. He was working on that. And they were, the only other colors present really was like this muted or dirty white on the armor, and then like this dark blue on the cloak. So that chrome like coming through and trimming everything out and being all the metal bits just popped. Yeah, it was really, really cool.
I'm absolutely going to look into that for like sword edges and stuff.
And then moving on to my third match, it was versus Sean, and he was the other Sons of Elmorn player at that particular event. That one went much better for me. I actually ended up going 0-2 losses against Liz, tie Colin, and win into versus my second run at Sons of Elmorn. And I think that was a little bit of luck and a little bit of longboarding. He gave me board choice. There we go. There's the word. After handing me a board, and I was just like, "Oh boy, we're longboarding this." He was like, "No." So, particular memorable experience there. But that's all to say. The Dice Heroes event was a ton of fun, and one of the things I'm not going to forget from Adepticon this year was hearing like Sean say he was returning to the game, Colin say that they had a local scene at one point in time that had kind of disappeared as a result of COVID, and that he was going to kind of hang the game up and was kind of hoping that this was going to be its last hurrah. He was going to get there and he was going to find out that everybody was super competitive, and that it wasn't going to be any fun. But he had so much fun. He was like, well, dang it. Now I want to reignite my local. This is awesome. Why couldn't you have all sucked? You know?
We will never let it die.
Not at all.
But all right. So getting that preamble aside, going into the Grand Clash, my first opponent was a listener named Nick, and he was rocking Haskell's Rascals. There were actually 3 of these throughout the event, of which I fight 2. The only other warbands that got 3, I looked it up, was Wormspat and Gore Chosen of Drum. So Haskell's Rascals, definitely expected to see them. And this particular match, the most memorable thing for me was that he had actually painted the pups of the warband like 2 of his own pit bulls, and they were named Lainey and Cinderella. And I remember in one of our games, this was such a fun little moment, was I rushed at Cinderella and he called her Cindy and was like, no, don't kill Cindy. And sure enough, like, I think she double critted because I'd already taken the other dog out. So there was 2 dodge, available to her, double crit defense. And then on his turn, he turned around, retaliated, and got a bite off from Cinderella, and she took down an orc. I went to go take Wallop or Dak. I think it was probably Wallop off the table, and he was like, "Oh, hey, could you put that back? I want to take a picture so I can show my daughter that Cinderella was able to take down an orc." And I was like, "Absolutely." So that was a really fun match. Actually, all my matches were an absolute blast. My next game was against Gerard the Professor, one of the opponents from last year that I knew I competitively wanted to compete against at some point. Across the table, like really, there are a few opponents that pre-existed me joining tournaments that I was excited to come up against eventually, like Gerard, Jimmy, even our own Davey and Phil. Davey evaded me at a couple locals for a while before I got a chance to take him on at a head table, and that was a highlight of that particular event for me. But Gerard being one of those players, when I sat down, I was just excited. He's got such energy. He's so skilled. He's taken tournaments before, and he brought with him.
He won the Nova with Mollog.
Yeah, absolutely. 2022. So, what did he bring this time? The Gnarl Spirit pack, Daring Delvers. So he was saying that he didn't have as many reps on this one as he'd like, that he kind of just threw the deck together either the night before or within the last 3 or so nights. But the games were so much fun, and the most memorable bit was our second game. So we actually tie, and we tied because we only got to play 2 games, and we ran them a little long, the both of us. So we actually had to call the TO over and ask him, hey, we know we're running really close to the end of time here. Should we start a third, or should we just call it here? And the call was to count it as a tie at this point. So he won the first game, and in the second game, I was able to win it by pulling out an 8 glory swing in my final activation. And that felt amazing. To set the stage, he had 3 of his... no, is that true? Oh, sorry. He had 2 of the Gnarl Spirit pack still alive and on the board. That was Goral, and it was his leader. And I had 2 alive as well. I believe it was Wallop and Headcracker. So he ends up killing Headcracker before I can do what I need to get done there. So I've just got Wallop, but I've charged him out already, and I want him to think that he's safe. But he's not. So Goral is up in enemy territory, and Goral is a large fighter at this point in time with some damage already dealt to him. So I really just need to get in and get 1 swing. But with my charged out range 1 fighter, that's probably not going to happen looking at the board. Maybe it was Toothdaga. One of the murdery orcs. I think it's probably Toothdaga. But charged out, And what I had on him was Walking Wall. And I was able to use redeploy going into my final activation to move him 4 and get him parked right next to Goral all of a sudden and try for that final, that final swing on that attack. And it did go through. And at that point in time, I'd lost my leader, so I didn't have primacy. He's only got 2 dead. And in order to get Smash him, which is in my hand for 2 points, either 2 of him need to be dead and I have primacy, and I don't have primacy, or 3 of them needs to be dead. And then I've got Great Hunters in my hand, and there's 2 of him alive yet, so I'm not going to score that unless either A, I can get primacy and be in his territory, or Goral is dead and there's only his enemy leader left. Well, in both cases, like Smash him, if I had primacy, it would score. Great Hunters, if I had primacy, it would score. Okay, like the hybrids on those score if Goral dies, but I also get primacy. Like, so either way, it's being satisfied here, but I need Goral down. And the attack landed, granting me 2 for the large fighter kill, 1 for primacy at the end, and then the 5 from the scoring cards I mentioned, all from that one moment. So it swung that particular match, like ending with 21-16. And if that attack just simply misses, I lose that one, 13-16. So we were we were both geeking out about that moment afterwards, running through how many points was that final kill.
All of them.
And then my next opponent is a returning opponent from last year. Shout out Discord user Slim Jim on our server, Jimmy. He was rocking the Arena, and I believe his pairing was Tooth and Claw here. I don't 100% recall which one was making the pairing. It definitely wasn't Fearsome Fortress. But if I had to bet money, it was Tooth and Claw.
The one that gave me my annihilation loss in the last year.
Yes.
Yeah, with his crushes.
So we had fought last year as well. And so he said that he was looking forward to the rematch against the Headcrackers, and that he hoped, it would go much differently this year. Because turns out last year, apparently, they were the better orcs. But he was my last opponent. One of my last opponents of the year prior, and I remember it being so much fun. And when the last year had wrapped up, he was one of the individuals that hung around and spoke with us a little bit. So throughout the year, we've been trying to get him to some of our local events, and they haven't panned out timing wise for him. So to see him again here was really great, especially since he said that he's been trying to stir up a local and has been unsuccessful. And so he didn't get a chance to really practice theory and I going into the tournament, but still got them, bought them. They were only, 2 weeks on the shelf at that point. Got them painted, got them there, got a comprehensive deck built out that he was going to be satisfied with, without the ability to practice. And our games were really fun. I did take this in 2. So at this point, I haven't actually had a true round loss. Took the first one against Hexbane Hunters 2-0, tied with Gerard, and then took this one. And then my fourth and final opponent for day one was another listener by the name of Paul. And once again, Haskell's Rascals. In this case, there was a little bit of like a BCP related event that kind of put us here. Well, no, it wasn't BCP's fault. It's just we had 2 different people drop between rounds 3 and 4. So I was actually paired into a different individual at that time. I think an Andrew Waxtel.
A higher bracket player dropped and a lower bracket player dropped. So you were meant to pair against the higher bracket, and so you and the lower bracket player whose opponents both dropped got paired up.
Right. And the reason for that at the time was, and I don't think I would, if I was the TO in this position, I don't think I would rule it any other way, especially since it was day one. But the round was actually like underway. People had sat down with their opponents, started rolling off for and making decisions before it was fully realized that there were two people that had dropped, because like my opponent was an unknown drop to
just
the
unceremoniously left.
Yeah. So to like not repair everybody, that's how Paul and I ended up facing each other, and I'm really glad we did. Paul was an absolute joy to play games with. He let me know, I'm a little bit newer to like the Hexbane Hunters, and he was learning a lot on them, so asked me to be patient with him. But he caught on, and during round 2, he did something that was the memorable moment for me in our matchup. Was he started the game off with, so during round 1 there were a lot of questions and a lot of like learning together and just having a really good time with that first match, but figuring out rules interactions that he wasn't aware of, or like realizing that the particular wording on some things, what like price of victory, like even though his leader's down, the other cards still have access to that ability when he's dead, sort of deal. So, like really good a match for like really getting down the warband. And then game 2, like you were describing your situation with the Art of War player and how he was picking up and your matches were getting harder and harder. Paul started off the round. He had Eye for an Eye in his hand, and I didn't know this. So he charges one of the orcs that I've put up, probably Daco, because I was using Daco's push very often to get him one close to no man's land and on cover. Charged in with, I believe, Amos. And when he did so, he moved one of the dogs back and forth through a lethal, killing the dog. And I was like, what are you doing? But he landed the hit with Amos, dealing, at least half my health in damage as an orc. And then after that activation, he was able to inspire the other dog and Pock. So for his second activation, he was able to come in with an inspired shot off of Pock, helping ensure that was really going to land, and killed Daco, and not only got glory for the kill, but then had Eye for an Eye already. So it was getting that momentum on his surges, and he had a upgrade heavy hand, so he wanted some help getting those upgrades out. And I actually thought that was a really clever play. I don't think it is always the right play, because I think the support capabilities of the dogs are obviously incredible, and the fact that your opponent isn't rewarded for the first dog they're able to take down, like you want them to be frustrated with what feels like a lack of a reward for taking the first one down. But in this case, I don't think it was a wrong play. I actually think it was really clever and caught me off guard. So yeah, that was my day 1. It was an absolute blast.
Awesome. Yeah, well, so we have 2 very well played day 1s from Brian and Skylar so far. For me, I had looking at it now, I realized that I had quite the gamut after my round 1. So round 1, this is also another, I believe anyway, this is Tony, I believe also from the Art of War group, was playing Skittershanks, which gave me some flashbacks to Wednesday night when this was my first match in that tournament as well, and just got critted out really hard in that match. And I was just like, oh man, is this just going to be a repeat of what happened in that tournament? But as it turned out, no. We had some very cold dice in round 1. I managed to win with a very large glory differential, just because the rats couldn't land a single attack, and it felt bad because he had said, I picked this game up two days ago or whatever, and I was like, oh no, like I just gave him this like probably feel bad game. Hopefully this isn't like coloring his thoughts of the game. Well, he came back swinging. We had quite the dance with 2 warbands with a lot of speed 5 fighters, where we're having our fighters move across both boards multiple times during the game because I wanted to be in his territory, but he was trying to get after my leader, and I was trying to keep him away from him. And ultimately, he ended up outscoring me in game 2 because he did manage to kill my leader, and score all of those juicy, big glory scores that those rats have for taking out leaders. But then, so had to go to 3, did manage to pull it out. Got another more favorable turn where, again, dice were in my favor, and I was able to just sort of camp out on all the objectives and score enough glory to come out on top. For my second round, I had to face our very own Josh with his Gore Chosen, which I was very worried about because they definitely put the beat down, and they have pings, and they can be disruptive to positioning, and he wants to be on objectives because he was playing Fearsome Fortress. So I knew going into this I needed to be careful about where I put my objectives because I needed to still be able to get into enemy territory, but I didn't want them to be near no one's land, which often I prefer that the objectives, at least one of them, be right on the line so that I can sort of easily move on to it for the Inspire without having to, risk my fighters too much. But in this case, I wanted no part of
the Gore Hulk.
letting Gore Hulk get anywhere near the skinks and just throttle them to death. So it was like, okay, the strategy here is going to be threaten with Clacktrock. He is the sacrificial lamb. He's going to be up front. He's going to pull all the attention, and hopefully he survives long enough to allow for the rest of the warband to do their thing. That might have worked, except I made some really boneheaded plays in round 1 of our first match where I had Will of the Slan, which is the card that requires you to hold an objective in both players' territory. I had I don't remember what it's called, but anyway, there's one that's hold more objectives than your opponent. So I was like, I only need to hold like 2 probably to be able to pull this off because he's a 3-fighter warband. And then I also had a surge that required me to flip. It's Astromatrix alignment where you flip a token and enemy territory, and it's a surge to score 1. So I was like setting up for all of this, and I go and stand on the objective, and I'm going to flip it because I'm like, I'm going to score the surge now so I can cycle it out and get another thing to score in the end phase. I do that, draw into a card I can't score, and I'm like, it's fine. I'll just delve it back. You can't do that.
Nope.
In Gnarlwood. So as soon as I did it, I was like, oh no, I've now locked out my end phase, and I will not score anything because I have no way of getting back onto an objective in enemy territory.
Danger.
And Josh then proceeded to crush and maim all of my fighters and handily beat me. I don't quite remember what the scores were. I wasn't keeping super close notes, but I know he crushed me, and it felt really bad, but it was a very good learning experience for the rest of the tournament because I was like, have to remember that. Can't multi-delve. Don't just score Astromatrix alignment just because it's in your hand. You have to time it right. So I come back rounds 2 and 3, and I managed to just outscore him and keep ahead by playing safer and actually getting through my objective hand rather than completely bricking myself. To Josh's credit, he had one more glory than me at the end of our 3 games, and that, I'm sorry, Josh, but I handed you a loss where you had a positive glory differential. That does not happen very often. So unfortunately, I did have to sort of dash one of our team. We're kind of like a team, right? I mean, we're all on the same podcast, and it's like, no,
One thing that we definitely were more conscious of this year was when a tournament is organized through BCP or Best Coast Pairings, is
Right.
you can enter a team name. And last year we didn't do that. And so we ended up having some round one pairings that were like Skylar and I might play each other all the time. I don't think this happened, but it's like Skylar and I might play each other all the time, and we end up starting the tournament with one of us having to walk away with a deficit.
Yeah, knocking each other out.
Yeah, but if you put a common team name in there, all the same punctuation and capitalizations, then you can avoid each other for at least round one. So that was really good because we had 6 of us, right? Or 5?
5.
It was Jazz and Alex, us 3, and Josh. So 6.
6.
Oh, I didn't count. I didn't count Josh.
Ouch.
He won't take that personally.
Josh, if you're listening, you know how Skylar thinks about you.
That's all right. Skylar knows how Josh thinks about him. It's fine.
But anyway, so apologies.
So we all put our common team names in there so that we could avoid each other round one, but then that doesn't spare you from later rounds because then it goes to the actual scoring. But it's a way that you don't just wind up fighting your friends that you fight all the time after traveling so long and just punching each other out of the event.
Yeah, right away. So knocked Josh down after just the second round. We kind of knew that like you can lose a game and still make it to day 2, but to win the whole thing, you kind of need to be able to get pretty close to undefeated. So, so you kind of know if you see one of your teammates, somebody's walking away a little disappointed. And as Brian already mentioned, I then had to face Brian in round 3, and as we talked about, so I back to back have to face teammates. And as we talked about, managed to rack up glory fast enough that there was not a way to catch back up. So although I had to go to 3 in my first 2 matches and then managed to take out Brian, I am effectively undefeated, although I did have the 2 game losses, no match losses. So that put me up against the other undefeated player for the day. And if anybody knows the results of the tournament, they should know who this is going to be. I had to face Amon at the end of day 1. And
Amon of Path to Glory fame.
Yes,
fellow
indeed.
podcast, stellar player. And it was immediately a daunting proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody kind of assumed that, if you wanted to take top spot on this tournament, you were going to have to be able to go through Amon. I wasn't looking forward to his Head Crackers matchup, which was running Daring Delvers, which so a little different than what I'd been practicing against with Skylar. I thought I probably knew the matchup fairly well, and I figured I've got a good way to be able to sort of hang back, try and score a little bit before having to engage too heavily, and try and come away with a win. I unfortunately did not give him a good showing at all, which was a combination of some really atrocious dice and some fairly poor opening power card hands. The objectives were fine, but my deck really is reliant on having power cards that allow for positioning and exploiting the exploration mechanic to be able to score some of your surges and be fast enough to get onto objectives in enemy territory. And I just drew into a whole bunch of upgrades after mulliganing. So game 1, if I recall correctly, I only managed to score like 5 total glory as I just couldn't get anything started. And Amon just came through and just was knocking off my fighters left and right and scoring everything that he had in his entire deck. And it was just like, this is not good. All right, we'll get through game 1, come back and have the deck work better game 2. board's positioning different, trying a different strategy of like needing to be able to do. So I longboarded in the first game thinking I want to keep the orcs away from me. What obviously that didn't work because then I couldn't score any of my stuff, and just didn't have the power cards. Game 2, I figured, okay, that didn't work. Let's try squaring things up so I can like try and run around his guys. Well, pretty much the same thing happened, except I actually had a decent power hand. I just couldn't, stay on objectives because I'd get knocked off from his attacks, and I couldn't land any of my attacks. I only managed to kill one orc across both games, and it was just pretty terrible. I think I only got 4 glory in the second game, so felt really bad. I was feeling like, man, I don't even know what I would do differently, because at this point we were still thinking. So this is the end of day 1 for all of us. I was still thinking going into day 2, we're doing single elimination bracket top 8. I know I've made it to top 8 because I was at the top table, but I was assuming I was going to have to play him on again, and I was thinking to myself, what am I even going to do differently in this game coming in the next day? So a little bit of a poor headspace, but had to sort of shake it off and come back swinging the next day. I guess that's something maybe we didn't cover for you guys. What were you thinking, knowing that you'd made the top 8 cut, going into day 2? What were your sort of thoughts, headspace?
Well, just to follow up is, after a game like that, coming away and like, you should always try and reflect on your performance and think what could I have done differently? How could I improve upon? But if you made all the right decisions and kind of mitigated risk as best as you could, mitigate the dice as best you can, there's only so much you can do. And like, as long as you felt confident that you made the right choices and you weren't like, oh, there was a glaring mistake that really turned the game. That's as good of a loss as you can hope for.
Yeah, of course. That's a good learning experience for anybody who's going to play this game, is that sometimes you just get lucked and there's just not a lot you can do. And it's not anything that you did wrong necessarily, although there's always ways to mitigate dice. Like Brian said, sometimes even if you do, you still can't overcome it. And that's something you just have to get used to. And especially if it happens in early rounds of tournaments, don't let it get you down, right? Like, you've got to be able to come back from that, stay in a positive headspace, and stay focused.
Yeah, because if you tilt, I know from my own experience, if you tilt, you make even more mistakes, and it just further spirals and collapses. So
absolutely,
maintaining a good headspace is critical to your overall performance, and just being a good sport, which I am guilty of not being a perfect sport all the time.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has those times where you get on tilt and you're probably not the best opponent, but I think everybody also knows what that feels like and recognizes it and understands it. So in some ways, people can be somewhat forgiving if it's not too egregious.
So going into day 2, I had a win-win, loss-win. So my loss being to Phil, hold objective warband. I was feeling still pretty good. Like, I got to be really sharp with my matchups going into day 2. Just make sure that you mitigate those hold objectives. Try and be a bit wiser about that and not just kill. But that is kind of my whole game plan is GSB, is straight aggro. So I wasn't too... I was in a pretty good headset, just kind of a come what may kind of mindset.
Yeah,
I would say similar. Something that unless you've experienced this type of event before, you might not be familiar with just how exhausted you are after the blitz of rounds on day 1. You should have a good focus on getting a good night's sleep if you make top cut for the next day, because you're pretty burnt at the end of a mental competition like this, where not only are you trying to compete to the best of your capabilities, but you're trying to do it within allotted round frameworks. In our case, 2-hour rounds for 3 games. And if any of your rounds are running slow, and going over that kind of average of 40-minute expectation, and you need to go to 3, you're robbing yourself of time for that third game. So it's a pretty taxing, mental exercise to, do a best of 3 at a tournament alone, but to do, in our case, for this one, 4 of them in the first day. Last year was even more of a brain burner. We did 5 of them on the first day, and getting coherent sentences out of any of us immediately following is
I totally agree. Yes, last year was a total brain burner, but in a best 2 out of 3, it actually is a huge benefit if you can go 2-0, because you really reduce the amount of brain burn.
Yes.
For day 1, I had 3 games, 2 games, 2 games, 2 games. So I was actually quite fresh coming out of day 1. But yeah, day 1 last year, five games was blitz, because it was also like an hour and a half round, so you're also having to make these decisions split second, one after the other. And then, man, if you're a crunch for that third game, it was flying.
Absolutely.
Most of my matches went either 2 time or up against time, and were still played in 2. And I was definitely reflecting later, like I was a common denominator in all 4 of my rounds, and we went to time. Like, I'm really going to need to crank that up for tomorrow. But all I could think about for a good hour afterwards was food.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, and something we should probably take a break here to just mention is that when you're doing these long tournaments, they do give you breaks between rounds, but it's usually no more than 45 minutes. And so, like, there's not a lot of time to be able to go and get a drink, get a bite to eat, and go to the restroom before you have to sit down for another 2 hours of games. So in some ways, it's like maybe having water in a water bottle that you can have with you, having a snack that's like portable that you can have available during your match if like you really didn't have time, because the last thing you want is for your brain to just sort of shut down because you didn't have enough energy, or you weren't hydrated, or you're tired, or whatever. You can be super well practiced on your warband. You can have all the preparation in the world, but like if you aren't taking care of your body, you probably won't have the mental fortitude to sort of make it through. And so there's some like just regular, just basic health stuff that you should probably think about if you're going to do something that's going to run 8 hours like these tend to do. So
Absolutely.
Very good point from Skylar that you get done with this and you haven't eaten much that day, and you're just like, I'm so hungry.
Yeah, I saw you had a whole pack of granola bars with you throughout the day. We have like a whole road crew. When we went down, we went me, Josh, Skylar, and Jazz and Alex. So we had a cooler with supplies ready to go at the hand. So we were well prepared. By the end of it, food, and I'm going to be my own worst enemy here. And if you don't know about it, it's the best kept secret of Adepticon is Kuma's Corner. If you want heavy metal and crazy burgers, it's amazing. Check it out.
Yeah, very tasty, but probably not the kind of place that you'd want to go to right after this when you've got a day 2, unless you're a crazy person like Brian.
What's up?
All right, but that wraps up our day 1, where we're heading into day 2, what our headspace is like. I think I will have Skylar lead us off this time.
Okay.
And
that sounds good.
I had to apologize for this first match. How did it go, Skylar?
So we assumed with the top 8 cut that we would be paired against each other, because ending day 1, I was 2nd and Phil was 7th. So just with the traditional, what type of cut is that again? Or pairing from a tournament standpoint?
Where you foil?
One match is into 8, 2 matches into 7.
You got seeding, I think, is the term in sports. I don't know if it carries over to BCP, but
either way, we were able to look at that, and Phil and I were pretty much both laughing at each other before we went to bed the night before, and we're like, "Study my deck."
Yeah, exactly.
So going into that one, the day before, I was on 3 wins and a tie, so I had not yet experienced my loss. Phil would give me that taste here in a moment. The first game really flew by. It ended super close, and it came down to what I thought at the time was the final activation. We were doing some math live, and I realized, like, if I sit here and try not to run over and kill his only remaining skink at this point, can I win? Like, I'm on an objective, he'll be on an objective, so we're going to be at the same place for tiebreakers. And like, so it's either going to true tie or he's going to edge me out if he has enough points in his scoring hand right now. He only had 2 cards because he'd scored literally the other 10. My 3 orcs are down. I think one of them gave up. One of them gave up large fighter glory, and in fact we forgot that for a moment. So he was showing 21 points, and I was looking at my hand, and I'm like, I'm also going to have 21 points. Like, is this going to work out? Or I have the potential to get 21 points if I can kill his skink. Was really what I realized. So went over, killed the skink, attempted to kill the skink and failed. And he ran away. So he was able to win. But I guess what was funny doing the math afterwards, and kind of what I was roundabout trying to arrive at, was even in my wildest dreams of killing that skink and getting to 21 points, he actually had a large fighter glory that we were missing we did the count up, and it was like, oh wait, no, I'm at 22. Like, you actually, like, yeah. I was just out of reach the whole time. I was like, dang it, okay.
Yeah.
But we both scored close to our full decks there. Like, he absolutely scored his full deck, and I had to bury 1 card. I think I realized I just wasn't going to get. So overall, really good game. Just he was able to, like, get the steam, pull ahead, and, like, stay ahead just by a smidge. So I felt okay going into the second game. I knew it was going to be really tight. He played the first game flawlessly. In fact, in these 2 games, the only mistake he made was the first game towards the end there. He ends up using a push gambit to pull a skink towards where I'm standing, so that he doesn't have to charge to make repeated attack attempts against me. But that allowed me the same thing, and he didn't really need that kill. It wasn't actually going to advance his scoring hand. And we realized this together. We actually talked about this immediately after the series, and I was like, I think that was the only mistake. Otherwise, like, absolute flawless gameplay met with dice, good enough to support it. I think the dice were very fair to both of us. They averaged out over the course of our series. Agreed. And ultimately, I just ended up outplayed by Phil at the top of his game this particular morning. And in the second game, I'll just touch on this one real quick. This was you go into a second game like this in a series of 3, or at least I do, thinking like, okay, I need this one, right? So, like, tighten up, like, think through everything just with like an extra thought cycle of, like, find the advantage, think through where you lost your advantages in the first game. Like, you need this to go to 3, and there's also a little bit of pressure to then do it as quickly as possible, because you're going to need that time for that third one. So I remember particularly setting up my first objective. I ended up picking objectives because I was hoping he would square off the boards relatively square for our matchup. And I took 3 and wanted to force him to come across the line if he wanted to inspire. I also knew that he had stealthy advance, and I ended up putting what I thought was going to be a lovely bait feature token within 4 of one of his starting hexes. Sure enough, when we got to placement, he put a skink there and got on it. Well, I set up the other, my 2 pushers, Daco and Wallop, to push onto other feature tokens to discourage other spots for stealthy advance to occur. And he comes in and I'm thinking like, all right, sweet. I've got Headcracker right there. I've got Tooth Dagger right there. Like I'm going to close in on that skink.
Yeah.
And take him down. I've got in my hand 2 different pushes to help me get into that position and keep that position. But the first thing I'm going to do is summon him down so that I've got some like an easy target for primacy. Sure enough, I got lucky. He had Stealthy Advance in his hand, came down. Unfortunately, he also had the Exploration Surge that scores if you have an Explorer across the line, and your exploration count is at least that of the round. So the first glory got him going and got him Explorer status, and then like the next activation, he was already then getting that second surge glory off that position. I was like, oh dang. Yeah, and I guess you must have had something to increase your.
Yeah, there's 2 power cards that I can use that just make the exploration count go up by 1. So if you have a combination of any one of 4 cards in the deck, you can immediately score Pathfinders in round 1.
Yeah, there you go. And so like this had also happened first game, the Stealthy Advance Pathfinders combo, and I was just like, okay, like. Hopefully like he just has Stealthy Advance this time around, doesn't have them both. Had them both, but I'm like, either way, I got the bait that I wanted. Let's go. And the first attack was 2 dice looking for swords, or no, looking for spell dice for focus. I got like, I think I'm pretty confident I got 2 successes there, and then he got a crit success. I was like, dang it.
Yeah, single dice crits.
Ran in later with Tooth Dagger. Was like, okay, well, at least I had a plan B ready for this. It wasn't what I wanted to use that activation for, but I was like, it was there for a reason. Like we're playing dice games. Sometimes dice be dice. So I ran him in with 3 dice looking for swords, and I got 1 or 2 successes again. And I was like, all right, like we'll get the primacy. We'll return to our game plan. I've got Stockpile in my hand and Hold 2. Like I've got a brilliant hand. I'm super excited about it. And I've got the pushes I need to, keep the positions I'm looking for. But this is one of them. He needs to die. I didn't expect him to live. And that second crit goes down, and I just looked at Phil and I was like, really? Like,
yeah, I saw the hope drain from his eyes.
Oh boy. But even then, I was able to, like, his deck just started like going straight into flow state for him, and he was to 20 points by the end of the game. And before I could know it, I was able to like come back and try to save face, keep the glory differential low. I got to 15 there at the end, but in the third, I knew like, all right. Like now I'm just trying to keep the differential low. Like he's got this. I can't reach him at this point.
I was in a similar position.
Well, I will say one of the sort of side benefits of having those crushing single dice crits was that I also got to steal primacy from you.
Oh yeah. Yep. So the first crit defense like reinforced his position so well that it was able to allow him to spend his activation moving a skink onto a third objective, right? Because so that got him his inspiration. It's like, dang it, okay, well, again, I've got the backup plan. I come in with the backup plan. Tooth Dagger misses and goes to him, and he's like, yeah, so I'm actually going to spend my activation going on to a 4th objective. And I'm just like, oh, that hurts. Okay, this primacy, that's yours. Okay, okay.
Take primacy.
What is that?
And I think at that point you didn't have another activation, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it was like I stole the 1 glory in a move that was in no way like a well played maneuver on my part. It was just luck, but still, it's like, oh, just backbreaking.
Anything to add to that game since it was shared between the two of us before I move on?
Oh, I think the only thing that I felt good about after having gotten to play the match, because this was back-to-back head cracker matchups for me across the 2 days, and I was just like, man, I know I can play better against them than I showed the day before, and I kind of wanted to have that opportunity again, but maybe not the first game, but I sort of knew that that was probably what it was going to be. So I was just thinking like all night about what do I need to do, and I feel like I was much more patient and much more intentional about my positioning to try and stop Wallop and Toofdaga from having easy charges. And I don't know if that was felt by you, but I feel like it worked out pretty well. It felt like there was times where they were not in position to make charges. And I was like, okay, I think this is the game plan. I think this is what I need to do until I can like get everything up and running. And obviously it worked out. I guess you can let me know if you felt that or not, but it felt good.
Oh, it was felt. It was felt.
Okay. And at this point, I was also still thinking there was a chance that I'd be facing Amon again. So I was like, okay, I can use this. This is practice. Like I have to be ready. But we'll discuss later about whether or not that happened. How were your rounds 6 and 7?
Yeah, so my round 6 was actually against Amon, and this was when we kind of realized that even though we started the day off of like traditional seed pairings in like a top 8 cut, this is when we realized that the remaining 2 games would be played Swiss style still, making sure that we saw opponents that we hadn't seen throughout the event. Going into
Amon had just started his day 2. He had played against our Jazz and her Black Powder's Buccaneers.
Yes.
Yep.
So he won the match versus Jazz, and so he was kind of thinking that he was going to end up paired against Phil again. I know I was before we saw the pairings, I was asking Phil, would you rather face him next or potentially later? Would you want a break between head crackers or like do you want to roll like the mental space that you're currently in, fighting them straight into the next round and like kind of take advantage of having that freshness? And he's like, yeah, but he's running Darien Delvers, you're running Fearsome Fortress. They're actually they have extremely different feels, the way that like you built and what your game plans look like. So it sounded like you would have preferred not to go directly back to back into another head cracking matchup.
Agreed.
So I end up with the Swiss pairing into Amon here, and Amon is one of the like aforementioned like reputation precedes you sort of combatants. Like on my wish list of individuals to eventually pair up against in a tournament and compete against, because I know how viable of an opponent they are.
Want to really have a chance to test opponent. Yourself.
Yep, exactly. And I was particularly excited to play Darien Delver's head cracker versus Fearsome Fortress. And I think I don't think you can go wrong with a current plot locked Nemesis deck. So like I don't think Beastbound Assault is the answer, is I suppose what I'm trying to say. But the other the other 3 plot options are all great for head crackers Mad Mob. And Darien Delvers offers something I hadn't really thought about before. He wasn't running Sudden Demise. So like I first heard Darien Delvers pairing, and Sudden Demise is almost synonymous with Darien Delvers for me. So I was like, oh, that's weird. Like I wouldn't want to lean into like something that would prevent me from getting primacy off of it. Like sure, like that's a 2-kill surge, but if you're using some sort of lethal or gambit to finish fighters off, then you're trading that 2 glory surge for primacy and potentially your scoreability on all your other cards. So I was thinking about it that way at first. And I had actually voiced that out loud to Phil, and he went, well, he's like, wouldn't with Daring Delvers, wouldn't you in this case want to use the pings to like throw an enemy off going into your turn, like setting yourself up where they thought they were safe, and all of a sudden, with the results of that ping damage, they're within one shot range, and you can get primacy off of it. I'm like, oh snap, okay. And all of a sudden, I'm slightly terrified because knowing that any one of my charges could result in quick roots and then be followed up by a wallop for 3 damage was something I was going to need to be mindful of when I did get to this pairing. So here we are. Amon and I both excited to face off against these different headcracker builds. And between both games, I land 1 attack.
Yeah.
That's bad, right?
Yeah, I've heard they've said that you need to land some attacks when you're playing aggro.
Yeah. So, despite that, and honestly, it was actually 2 attacks. It was just 1 attack at the end of the first game that literally didn't matter and was really spiteful. I needed to get over the line with Daco. He was my only remaining survivor, and I was like, this could be a move, this could be a charge. And I'm like, I'm pretty irritated. I haven't made any of my attacks. Let's make it a charge. And on 2 swords and range 3, he's like, yeah, I can actually do that. I'm like, why? I'm actually going to circle back to that because it was the wrong play. But the second game was the first time I actually landed a hit that mattered. And even then I wasn't able to follow up on it. So I was never actually able to get a kill across both games. So that kind of shows how rough my side of the dice were.
Lose?
I do lose in 2, but the first game I'm particularly proud of. I represented myself well. Afterwards, Amon actually paid me the compliment of saying that he felt that I outplayed him at every turn in that first game, and that the dice just weren't there for me, because that first game actually came down to I mentioned I was getting Daco across the line, and at that point in time, I had a way to secure primacy. Oh, what was it? That's gonna bug me. I think it must have been that I had brutal primacy in my hand, or brutal
reprisal.
Primal brutality. There it is. So that's the bread and butter card that you never leave at home when you're playing Mad Mob. It's the one that gives you the choice between either gaining the primacy or giving it up to make an attack. And you 99% of the time are going to choose it for that first mode to gain the primacy. But what I had was in my hand, I had okay. Here we go. I actually wrote this down because I was so excited. So I went first in round 3, and using my 4th activation, I got my only surviving fighter, Daco, who's vulnerable at this time, unfortunately, just over the line into Amon's territory. So I'm within 1 of No Man's territory still here. I considered holding on to Primal Brutality in my hand until the end of the round. But I also wanted to make sure that I was going to be hard to move, hard to kill, because I'm doing a lot to try to swing this game in my favor, having not landed a single attack. The glory has been really low for me. I've thankfully, just through my knowledge of this matchup, been able to hold his glory really low as well. So going into the 3rd match, we were actually both only at 4 total glory. Going into round 3. Yeah. And neither of us had gotten the primacy once. So neither of us had inspired.
Wait.
Sorry.
So you only had Daco left. So he had only scored 1 card, and the other 3 glory of the total 4 was a card.
So going into the final round, I had more than Daco alive. I had Headcrack and Daco. But before this, when he'd gotten kills, he hadn't. So I think he actually ended up getting the primacy once. Yes, off of one of the kills. But one of the other kills, he'd actually finished off with Daco. He didn't want to risk his leader in a particular situation. So he was trying to figure out which one to do the range 3 attack with, and decided ultimately, from a positioning standpoint, to use Daco instead. But that doesn't award him the primacy. So we went really primacy light. I definitely didn't have it at all before round 3, and he had it just the once. And we were still only at 4 kills each. At this point in time, he'd actually mentioned to me how frustrating it was to score Green Fury. Green Fury is a card. It's a surge, scores instantly after a successful attack made by a wounded fighter, a friendly wounded fighter. So the frustration
he couldn't score it because he couldn't land, or you couldn't land.
Because I couldn't land, right? Well, for some reason, due to that banter, I thought he had discarded it during like the second round of holding it, because he had it since the beginning. But it turns out he held it to the end, which is where my mistake in running Daco over in a charge fashion comes into play. Is if I had been paying attention to obviously that banter, or even just, and this is my first time with the deck, so I don't know if he's got Green Fury built in or not. I would assume so, and I should just do a move here instead of a spiteful charge. I actually end up giving him the ability to score Green Fury. So I pull Daco just over the line. I'm considering holding on to Primal Brutality to just try to deny him having primacy, but that's not going to move the game in my favor. So what I do instead is I play it, grabbing the primacy. I play Spirit of the Beast, which is an awesome card. It's the only way I'm going to be able to inspire here, because Headcrack is at this point dead. It's going to give me it's going to inspire my fighter immediately because I've got the primacy, and that's one of the things that Spirit of the Beast does. And while I have the primacy, it's going to keep him on guard. And then I throw it on Walking Wall on him. In my hand, I have Conqueror's Domain, Great Hunters, and Bring It On. Conqueror's Domain is going to score here off a Walking Wall because I'm on guard. So even if he like ties me, he's not going to be able to drive me out of this position. Great Hunters, I need to stay again over the line into his territory, so I need to not be driven back. As long as all my surviving fighters are over there and I've got the primacy token, I've got these 3 points. So there's 4. And I've also got Bring It On in my hand, which is a surge that says be charged and survive the charge. He's got 1 activation left. And I'm thinking, even if he has Green Fury, I need him to miss. So I need Green Fury not to score because I need this to miss. Well, he comes with Headcracker, an inspired Headcracker, and throws 3 dice looking for swords on me. Gets a crit hit. I don't even get a chance to defend with the reroll or my on guard status because I've only got the 1 defense. And that's the game right there. Oof. But had it not been, we counted it out even with my Green Fury mistake, charging in. I suppose so. Green Fury again wouldn't. If I survive this, it doesn't score. So if I survive, I actually take that game, and I take it without ever landing a successful attack outside of that spite attack at the very end. I take it without felling any enemy fighters. So even though it was a loss, it was such a good game. I mean, I've definitely spent the most amount of airtime I've talked about a game so far on this particular moment because we took a break real quick afterwards to go get like a drink and stuff like that. And we were talking about even after the second game then, where I continue to not roll successes, he bought me a drink at the bar afterwards to just lament my dice and told me again that that compliment that he actually felt I outplayed him that first game. So that'll stick in mind for a long time. I was really happy with that. So I am very disappointed to say then that second game I wasn't able to bring that sort of level of competition. I felt like as I was trying to set things up, he was able to come in with a counterpunch and each of those attacks were landing successfully and perfectly, like, having a quick roots to set it up, coming in with a wallop to take him down, things like that. So I was losing fighters so quickly that I was down and out before the end of round 2 there. There was a point where I ran Head Kraka into Wallop and Tooth Dagger because they were next to a cover feature token, and I needed to make something happen because my initial hand had blocked out on scoring, and I'm down to just him and Daco. And I remember running in there into that position, adjacent to both of his strongest fighters. He's like, "You're wild," and I'm just thinking internally, I'm desperate. I don't have anything working for me this particular game. But looking back, one mistake, because I've thought about these games a lot. So what I should have done is, after playing the deck for the first time, I had a good read on it to understand that the focus of his Daring Delvers deck was to invade. The exploration scoring doesn't work unless he invades. And he's running them hyper aggressive, trying to ping you down to set up taking a fighter down and getting primacy off of it. So he needs to come to me. And that's the beatdown. And I didn't recognize that well enough into the second game. I actually had choice for the second game on if I could do boards or tokens, and I picked tokens and handed him a board. And I shouldn't have done that. What I should have done is I should have longboarded and tried to out passive score him. But I didn't think about that until after the match, when
I'm sure you were thinking
playing them all back.
I'm sure you were thinking that the dice had to even out.
Well, a little bit.
I mean, you would hope, but as many of Amon's opponents noticed in day 2, dice were just not going to work for whatever reason.
Well, it's because he brought the banana.
Oh, yeah.
TO at some point was like, "Okay, whose is this? There's been this banana just moving around the table," and Amon's like, "I brought it as an offering to the dice gods." It worked wonders.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, my third game, and I had to play Brian. So second Adepticon, second Adepticon in a row. Where we're playing each other on day 2, and we're starting a little bit of a Mallet curse here.
Battle Mallet curse.
Oh, what did I say?
Ballot Mallet.
Yep. Ballet Mallet.
That's actually awesome. Ballet Mallet. That would have been a better name for the arena, is Ballet Melee.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But Brian brought the aforementioned Gnarl Spirit pack, and the reference to the curse being that Jason and Jared of the Battle Mallet are practice partners. They're their most common practice partner, and Jared will beat Jason majority of the time, according to them, in practice. But then at a tournament, Jason is the one who always takes down Jared when they meet up in the bracket. Except for their last tournament that they went to, the curse finally broke. So I think after that curse broke, it went into the ether and was like
transmuted to you.
Brian and Skylar played each other last year. Let's do this again.
Yeah. Last year, your Mad Mob and my Dread Pageant in Harrow Deep. It was like, I was like, we had a lot of good matches, but I was like, I think it's 60-40 in Skylar's favor most matches, who wins. And then, Adepticon, it was a complete just, I had your number and I took your lunch money.
Oh, you absolutely destroyed me. This year too.
This year too. And on top of that, both Adepticons, you have a last minute card swap suggestion that I'm like, you know what? That's actually a good call. And I swap that in there, and you're like, yeah, it's going to work great against everybody, not against nobody but Skylar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Last year it was the Hadzu bomb. I put Screaming Demise on him and then shared pain to save somebody else to kill Hadzu and throw a charge token on another one of Skylar's fighters. I wasn't able to use it to that great of an effect. I did use it in some forms against my opponents, but it worked exactly as Skylar suggested against Skylar. And then this year, he just made a good upgrade swap of the Envenomed Spurs to give my leader a reactionary attack. And whether it be the card draws or just my fighter being dead, I wasn't able to use it to much effect throughout the event, or it didn't wind up with a first hit, second hit, both successful. But thank you, Skylar, for demonstrating why you suggested it.
I can't wait to find out what I suggest to hurt me with next year.
Man, maybe you should just stop suggesting things to him. He's just going to twist the knife on you like that.
Oh, speaking of great card combos, by the way, Screaming Denies made me think of this. So one particular moment I was proud about across the whole tournament, and this was actually in the game with Amon, the first one. I ended up knocking one of his fighters away from a vulnerable, or at least already damaged, like within kill range. I don't think he was already at 1 health, but like a 2 damage on my Tooth Dagger situation. Like kicked his wallop away during, I think, round 2, where like he hadn't charged yet and could definitely still get the attack down. And so he ends up using their group push, the big stomp, to push back into that position. And I was hoping that would happen because I had redeploy in my hand and I was trying to bait out a push to to see if he had they've got a few great push cards, the big stomp being one of them, and the one that lets you trade primacy for a push of 3 or just use the card for a push of 1. I can't remember the name at the top of my head, but anyways, was hoping to bait one of those pushes out because I thought that was going to be like his next best use of an action would be to try to get that free attack against Tooth Tag again. Sure enough, he pushed in, and I was able to use redeploy off of that feature token and just hide for a push of 4 away on the back line in such a way to where he was going to have to run like through somebody, so he wasn't gonna be able to make it with a single charge. So like straight out of dodge. Was really happy with that play.
Very nice.
So your game 4 was against me.
Well, game 3 on that day.
Yes, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, why don't you regale us? I've described the game against Phil.
Yep.
How'd this one go?
So, shall I start from the beginning of my day, or should I just end off with Skylar's end?
Let's start with my end.
Okay.
My demise.
Well, first game, I think you longboarded me. Was that game 1 or was
did? And we were sitting next to Jazz, so I made sure to give her a nod, wink, and a smile, and thank her for always keeping longboard in the back of everyone's head.
Oh yeah, and that did stifle some of my end phase, but man, was I had your number and I was taking your lunch money again. I just started walloping on you. I think I trapped. I ended up killing Tooth Dagger in round 1, and then started off round 2 with trapped throwing a javelin into or no, this was still round 1. Yeah. So I killed Tooth Dagger, and then I killed Wallop by throwing my Lupin's javelin to pin him against the wall while he was trapped. And so round 2, you were already down 2 fighters. You did score in the end phase because I was like, oh yeah, it would have been smarter to actually push Headcracker off that objective you seemed so intent on holding. But I never claimed to be outsmarting people, just out killing them today. So, but yeah, after having Wallop and Toothdaga dead in round 1, round 2 just ended up with tabling, and then we went on to game 2, and yeah, that was I think game 1 was 16-8, and then game 2 was similar. I had the board choice, so I flushed it up against you, and so I ended up tabling you there 19-7. That one felt more egregious because there was one big highlight moment where, again, start of round 2, he's like, oh, you won the roll off, and you're like, do I go first or do I have Brian go first? And you're like, I'm probably taking it. And I'm, once again, similar to Ripa's, I was staring at +1 dice, +1 damage in my hand, and Beast Kira on the board. I was just like, go ahead, take the first activation, go ahead. Unless he guns hard for Kira, like I don't think he was doing a 3 damage attack anywhere, so Kira was pretty safe because him going first, he wasn't going to be able to throw an extra damage onto Kira. So I was like, I got this. And so he went first. He charged Wallop. He had Sarkar was 1 hex away from Dako and Toothdaga, who were adjacent. And then Wallop charged in to smack Sarkar, creating a 3-fighter chain with Dako and Toothdaga. So then Sarkar got hit, pushed away, and I just like, all right, upgrade. And you're like, oh, it's like, yep. So she comes swinging in for 2 damage with Grievous with an extra dice for, so 5 dice swords, 2 damage with Grievous. And she proceeds to, how did you put it?
Yes. You're dealing 3 damage. Would you like to push?
Yes.
Dealing 3 damage. Would you like to push?
Yes.
And looks like you're dealing 3 damage. Would you like to push?
Yes. It was massive. It was also wild dice because like they had been pretty average, I'd say, throughout the day or throughout the tournament. And then this big glorious attack, I just wanted that lunch money. So
I mean, you were throwing 5 dice.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it was explosive.
With swords, no support. You had full support, and so first roll was 2 crits, 2 swords, and you only saved Wallop because he was a large fighter, and I had already caused 2 damage to him. You only saved him because of Warpaint Ward. Yeah, it was like, whoo! That was the guy I was really gunning for because I even put Cleave on that one, or was it Ensnare? Like I had used Determined Brutality on top of that, so it was just even more. But Warpaint Ward saved him there, so I wasn't able to score any cards off this.
So this, in my defense, was the final match of a 2-day tournament.
Yeah,
this round didn't like this instant. Your activation went nowhere near what I expected it to be. I forgot about scything. It hadn't come up so against Gerard. I was particularly mindful of it and made sure that there were no opportunities for it. Or she was dead. One of the two. Super mindful of it. At this point, up against you, totally forgot.
Yeah.
And I was so scared of Wallop dying because he was in charge distance of Goral. And he was a large fighter, and he'd already
charge distance of all 4 of my fighters at this point.
Right. But Goral was the one particularly on my mind because of the 3 damage output. Right. I'm like, man, I've already got 2 damage on him, and he's going to be a large fighter kill. He's going to be worth 2. I haven't dealt damage to you at this point, and I really need to. So I want to charge him in and try to get that 3 damage down with Cleave. Which, well, Cleve didn't end up mattering against Sarkar there, but wanted to get some damage down before he dies, and that's all I'm thinking about. And so I charge him in to the position that wasn't offering you support for my attack, and I was like, all right, I got some damage down on him. I'm going to kick him away so he can't support. Perfect. And then pass on power over to you, and you're like, upgrade. I'm like, oh no, no.
Upgrade, determined brutality. And so, and Kira just went off. Like, she lives for these moments, and I got 2 of them during this tournament. But this time she was made for this. She rolled, like I said, against Wallop, 2 crits, 2 swords, and then 2 crits, and then 2 crits. It was like, Jesus, chill out. So that was how round 2 started, and then it was just picking them off. But yeah, that was pretty savage. You made sure to kill Kira so that I didn't get any extra opportunities, but that's when Sarakar's Envenom Spurs was able to run in and secure kills with a staff attack and a range 1 attack.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So that was the end of day 2 for me and Skylar's career.
Oh man.
Hold on.
End of their career.
Hold on. I would like to at least point out that if you're going to lose all of your games on day 2,
no spoilers. No spoilers.
We'll
get there. We'll get there.
All right.
But I made the Mad Mob. I can I created the Mad Mob. I can take them out of this world too. I painted them, so maybe that's the secret sauce: is you got to paint your own minis, and then I'm not going to take your lunch at Adepticon. Or I'd love to see what a game at Adepticon looks like with skates.
Or just offer to paint your opponent's warband.
Oh,
right. It's
okay.
Like, that one's going to be a hard one. What are they playing lately? Oh, unpainted. Let me help you with that.
Could really beat the banana out of that. All right. So my game day 2 first matchup was I was back against Jesse P with his Rippas. As we got matched up, I was like, well, balance probability after the first pairing says that you bite my butt. And he's like, one could hope. It was a really fun match. We were, it was a whole lot of like, come on, 6s! Like some big casino energy. But it was fun because the dice were a bit more sporting and we had a lot more back and forth. But ultimately, it did go both games in my favor. There was quite a few times where he was trying to get a kill with the goblin attack and a separate kill with the dog bite. And so there was a lot of times where he's like, do I be greedy or do I be safe and double up those attacks on one fighter to secure the kill? Or do I split them to go greedy and try and kill 2 fighters and really like swing the game? I was like, without like giving away what I totally like, what he should do and tell him exactly. But it was like, I think you should play it safe and stack on one fighter, but I fear you going greedy and splitting your attacks. He's like, why would you say that? Now I'm going to be greedy. I was like, no, I think you should stack on one fighter. I don't want to say which, but I fear him being greedy. And he started being, and these 2 games, he was being safe and it was working off much better for him. So as with 40K, as with AOS, don't split your attacks, stack up, secure, and get the, score, do the safe attack to score the cards in your hands. Don't try and be greedy and swing the game in one moment, because it could ultimately swing the game in the other way for your opponent.
Yeah, good advice.
So, but game against Rippa's second verse, same as the first. Ended up taking those both, but they were better than our first match. And then my game 2 was against Jimmy Malini. This was a fated match. He had just come from his match, I believe, against Amon, or is this day 1 was his match?
No, he played. I don't remember who he played first, but he played him on day one.
Okay. But it was, so we first met and faced off last year at Adepticon game match or pairing, whatever you want to call it, pairing 9 of the tournament, the final matchup, and we were both burnt out. And it was an incredible match. I will never forget that. It was great, and it was awesome meeting him. So we come back here, and he's playing Storm of Celestis. I'm playing Gnarl Spirit, and I was just like, all right, here we go. And he ended up just outscoring me. I couldn't really land meaningful attacks. I could get attacks off, but not where it mattered. He tanked up Celestis into this massive defensive tank, and he denied any other targets for me. So it was like he had it pretty well in hand, and he's just like, I'm sorry, man. I wish the dice were better. I'm sorry. I was like, don't give me your pity. I've still got 2 more games. Like, screw you. I was like, you remember how last year went? Because last year he beat the pants off me, or he beat me narrowly in game 1, and then we went to game 2, and I ended up turning it on him, and we're like, oh crap, we got to play a third game. Like, my brain's fried. How can I? So I was like, I still got 2 games. You shut up. Don't give me your pity. And then game 2 was worse. And it was just like game 2, he longboarded me, and he was just picking off every fighter. And I'm like, you're leaving Goral alive to pity me. Like, you're giving me that 3 damage attack because, like, I can just, because I put Wily Hunter on him, which is a upgrade reaction to make a push after a attack action. So I could just go hammer time like Mario and just like bop and move over, and just go down the chain, because at one point he was behind enemy lines facing the rear of the Celestis, as the Celestis are just firing off grenade launchers at the rest of my guys. And I'm just ready to go to town with the hammer. And I was like, you keep not targeting Goral. It seems like you're giving me an opportunity, and I despise this pity. And Goral just would not hit. 2 hammers would not. I gave him an upgrade to give him +1 dice, would not hit. 3 hammers would not hit. Like, what is happening? And he's just like, I'm so sorry, man. Reroll that. I was like, no, I will not re-roll that out of pity. So he played really well, and I was just like, yeah, it's weird, man. Like, yeah, just the dice can do that, and aggro warbands depend on those dice for scoring. And Storm of Celestis have some of those amazing hold objective cards, like Surge 2 for holding 2. Like, cannot sleep on that.
Absolutely.
So Jimmy and I are 1-1 for Adepticon matchups. So
yeah. Well, maybe you'll have to get him back in Nova.
I'll just have to hunt him down.
So that wraps your day 2, because we started with your game 3, right?
Yeah, so day 2, by the end of it, like, we were trying to make sense of how the pairings worked. We weren't really sure how it was in the as it's going. You don't know how the pair-ups are actually working until you see more of them, right? So I didn't know how I was ranked. I didn't know what was, like, you guys were telling me I was doing really good, and I'm like, I never conceived myself as, like, podiuming. So I'm like, I'm just not thinking about that. I'm just here to have a great time and fight Jimmy and take Tyler's lunch money.
As Battle Mallet would say, I'm in your pocket now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got you in my pocket.
We've heard Skylar. We've heard Brian. I suppose that means it's time for me to bring it home. So, as we discussed, I had to start the day with Skylar and bumped off Skylar from day 2. So, and we already discussed as well that I thought after winning that match, I was like, oh man, all right, back to Amon. Here we go. That's probably going to be it. And then I was paired into Damien S, Canadian Damien, who is really cool opponent, really great guy. Had some really awesome sort of kit to go along with his Mournflight. He was running Daring Delver's Mournflight warband, where he had like, I think it was just a holder for his dice, but maybe it was for his whole warband. But it like looked like an old book, and it had like the broken glass from Shadespire, and then he had these like ghostly tokens to use as activation counters, and it was like, all right, this person, somebody who really loves their Mournflight, and like having played Cameron.
I bought something similar off of Etsy once, and it wasn't a directly themed book, but they did have off-brand Grand Alliance symbols on them. But it was incredible book and totally on brand.
Yeah. So kudos if you're listening, Damien. Really great job. So I'm like, okay, Mournflight's got lots of passive stuff. Holding objectives can come back with some really nice counterpunch. I've got to be really careful about like giving him too many attacks. So I set up my positioning such that I should be able to like have easy jumps across the line without putting too many fighters at risk. And I was just kind of hoping that, you know, my passive can outdo his passive, because I know that the Mournflight have a lot of really strong passive glory. And so we sort of start things off. I've got some nice easy surges. I know that I scored Pathfinders right away in, I don't remember which game it was, but it was either game. It was in one of my opening hands, and the other one I had Stealthy Advance, which, honest to God, that card has the worst name possible because it's never stealthy at all. You're charging somebody into enemy territory. It's not sneaky. But so I'm like setting up. I've got some seed glory. I'm like, okay, now if I can just sort of weather the storm here, I should be able to get everything rolling. And for folks who haven't played a lot against Mournflight, they actually don't start all that accurate. A lot of their fighters are on 2 Fury to start. So I was like, I think I've got a pretty decent chance. And game one, that was definitely the case. He had 3 or 4 complete whiff attacks from his leader. And like, I was putting 1 or 2 skinks into bad positions because I had to score objectives. And so I was like, okay, I'll take the glory and then maybe he'll get a kill, but I've at least scored my surges. And unfortunately for him, in this game one, you just couldn't get anything going with the dice. And I just sort of run away with it. In game two, it's much closer. We're kind of going back and forth. But Clacktrock in this game, and shout out to Sleek's Bull, because he had helped sort of be a sounding board for some of the last choices for what cards to use in my deck. And he really was pushing for me to include Supreme Predator, which is a Clacktrock restricted upgrade. And I was kind of hesitant to take it because it was like, what if Clacktrock's dead? What if you get it and you don't have a good situation to be using Clacktrock? It's like, is this really worth it? And I ended up taking it after practicing with it on the Wednesday night tournament. So I used that Wednesday night tournament, which shout out to Davey for suggesting that I do this. I used the Wednesday night tournament as a testing ground for some of these decision point cards for Saturday. And so I ended up in this second game being able to get Heaven Blessed Weapon, which gives Clacktrock +1 dice and knockback, and Supreme Predator, which gives him a reroll, so that he was rolling 3 smash, 3 damage with a reroll, and he just started tearing through ghosts. And it was just kind of like, you know, I'm not normally the beatdown, but when I need it, sometimes Clacktrock can come through for you. Normally my Clacktrock is snake bitten as all get out, and he'll land like 1 attack a game, and I'll just be like, oh, that's how it goes. But this game, he was just landing everything, and it was just like crit after crit, and he was just dealing so much damage. And I was like, well, I guess that's how it goes sometimes. But we both scored a decent amount of glory in that game, so it was like a nice fun back and forth. I felt like really good showing, despite the fact that things were not going in Damien's favor. And then to end things off here, I did get paired into Jimmy. Kind of figured that would be the case after that round 6, just looking at who was left for me to face and the records. And so an interesting matchup where you have 2 hold objective warbands in a tournament where we kind of expected that the whole field was going to be aggro. So I didn't actually expect to see any other hold objective warbands. So I wasn't quite sure what to think going into this, except that I'd been talking to Gerard a little bit earlier, and we were sort of talking through like what are the advantages and disadvantages of facing another hold objective warband, and we were both talking up Wanshi's device a lot, which is this push card that the lizards have if you haven't faced them, and it's either a distraction, so you can just push one enemy fighter, one hex, you just get to choose, or it has the second mode where you can tell your opponent, all right, you get to choose where you push your fighters, but you have to push 3 of your fighters. When I first played this, I was just like, I figured, oh, Jimmy's, got lots of experience. He's a great player. He's going to know this card. So he's on 3 objectives, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to use the second mode. You have to push 3 of your fighters. And he's like, wait, what? I've got to push 3 of my fighters?
Yeah, it's massive.
I was like, yep, you gotta push 3 of them. So it worked out fairly well for him in the sense.
Did he have a 4th fighter? Was the dog still alive at that point?
Yeah. I couldn't hardly do anything in game 1 to kill any of his fighters. They were very tanky. He was able to inspire quickly.
Gotcha.
And so he was like well positioned in sort of this like, I'm gonna hold back and like make you come to me situation.
Yeah.
And since he was holding all the objectives in his territory, I couldn't inspire and I couldn't score a lot of my glory. So I was just like, well, I'm going to do what I can, but hopefully I can use this to disrupt him. He played it very well, where he was able to shuffle a fighter from a cover hex onto an objective, and then shuffle the fighter that was on an objective off, and then move the bird dog on. And I forgot that Sleek can hold objectives.
Yeah, him and Riptooth, rare breed. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, so he's still holding more objectives than me. So I couldn't score the stuff in my hand. So game 1, Jimmy pretty handily beat me down. I only scored like 8 glory or something. It was not very good. And I was like, okay, I gotta bounce back from this. This is the last round of the day, last round of the tournament. Got to have a good showing. Round 2, I had some better cards, played a little bit smarter because I was like, okay, I got to stay out of range of those. I can't just throw my skinks in hoping to score surges. I've got to have a better plan. And so I moved up Clackchalk first to just try and use him as sort of a distraction, get in there and try and be disruptive, and then slowly pick up glory as we went. And I was behind pretty much the entire game, and I was like, I just got to keep pushing, and I just got to keep pushing. And I was like discarding a whole bunch of my end phase cards because I couldn't score them because of the positioning that his warband was using. And I was like, if I can get enough surges, I can end the game with the great plan, and I can have a big enough glory surge at the end to maybe be able to pull it off. And I did manage to get it with one of those big 7 glory end phases, and I pulled ahead by like just a couple points. So I managed to win game 2, and I'm like, okay, feeling good. Force game 3. And then we did not have a good match in game 3. Well, it was a good match, but it was like I had all the luck. I had the perfect open power card hand. I was able to teleport into his backfield to clog up an objective. I had cards to be able to push him off of objectives. I had stuff to get my exploration count up so that I could score Pathfinders in round 1 without hardly having to do anything. And it was just like, oh man, that's all going so great for you. I got inspired right away. And I've got Autopodle as the one who's camping in his territory because I'm like, I'm 3 dodge, I'm on guard. He's not going to be able to shift me without getting super lucky. And so then I'm like, I'm pretty well set. I can kind of just start to try and lock him down with Autopodle. So I start rolling a lot of these Autopodle attacks. At the end of round 2, I'm like, okay, I get the crit, get the hit, do 2 damage. So I start off round 3 the same way. Get another crit, do it again, get another crit. And it ends up, I get 5 attacks in a row with Autopodle to go off, doing a total of 10 damage.
What?
And
sometimes it could just be a turret.
You just kind of end the game on sort of like almost like this sad note where it's like everything had been this like heady back and forth of like having to claw my way back to the game 3, and then game 3 was just this like explosion of crits, and it just blew everything out. And it was like it didn't matter that he had the right positioning or that he had better defense stats or anything, because it was just like he has crits with a cleave and ensnare attack. And it's just like, oh man. I mean, kudos to Jimmy, played an extremely good game. I thought it was a really, really good match, but it was not the way that I think either of us would have wanted it to end, because it just felt like there was nothing he could do. And, it kind of brings it full circle where there's this feeling of like, hey, dice are going to dice. And the more you rely on them, sometimes there's that great risk. So I did manage to win all 3 of my day 2 matches, which felt pretty great. And that put us into a situation where we had to do sort of the math of figuring out, okay, this tournament points scoring system, who's in what position. We know Amon's first because he didn't lose a single game. And then it was like, okay, do the quick figuring. And it's like, I'm second and Brian's third.
Yay!
And we just barely edged out for 4th Jimmy. So felt pretty great. They made a change from using shade glass trophies to the regular Warhammer trophies this year. So we have the hammer trophies that they gave out.
So for those that may see, like for 40K, they have it's a cylinder base plinth and then a gauntlet coming up out of it with a upraised chainsword for 40K and a hammer, like Stormcast hammer for Age of Sigmar.
It's the Liberator hammers.
Yeah. That's it.
So pretty cool. They gave out a bunch of prize support to everybody to just say like, here's a bunch of Underworld stuff, like take anything you don't have. And if you already have it, take it back home so you can like give it out as prize support to your local leagues or your local tournaments.
And cool with the prize support is they started from 8th place up. So they got their first picks. Yeah.
Yeah. So an awesome tournament. Everyone played extremely well. We've talked a lot about all these games, and I think we started out by saying we led with what our expectations were, what we were feeling about the meta, and I think it's pretty clear as we came out of all these games where it's like, yes, aggro is strong, but across a whole tournament and across best of 3 matches, I think I can feel fairly safe in saying for the group here that, despite the strengths of aggro, there's such risk with aggro, and that, certain players ended up dying on their dice. And it was like, you played the game right, but you ended up losing because you couldn't roll hits or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of the defining features of Gnarlwood. I mean, I think you and Jimmy were great at countering my thesis here, but Gnarlwood's had a clear bent towards aggro this whole season.
Very much so.
That has led to a lot of my games, in my experience, being dice dependent. And if one person's dice are cold, then it can be very one-sided. So sometimes it is the dice are sporting and it's a fun back and forth. But I had those games in the tournament as well. But other games can be a total blowout, and you can't do anything about the dice.
And so, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time belaboring like what do we think is going to come next, because some tinfoil hatting there a little bit. But I feel like coming out of this tournament, I actually feel like the Nemesis landscape is maybe, well, aggro is strong. If you lean too heavily on it, you can be punished for it. And so it's like you have to find those flex options to be able to score without dice so that you can stay in those games when you don't have the dice working in your favor. To your point, I think Jimmy and I both played really heavily into hold. Davey was playing a very flexy Dacunin crew on Wednesday night, and he did exceptionally well with them. I mean, that was the practice match that almost broke me from playing my Starblood. So I'm curious to see if people maybe adjust, at least the people who are at this tournament, maybe other folks listening to this, if they'll think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't just run aggro. Maybe Tooth and Claw isn't always the best choice.
Well, I definitely did lean into that thought. Like, I was just like, well, I'm just going to embrace the aggro. I'm going to go with the most aggro warband and the most aggro rival deck to pair with it. And it did well. But with leaning so heavily into the dice, it could have just as easily been Gerard, who is also a GSP player, or any other aggro combo. Like the Rippas are always a contender in that case. If they go hot, Rippas having the dog bite kind of is one of those ways that you can mitigate the dice, is because they have a follow-up attack every time.
Absolutely.
Especially in championship with like great strength, it can really stack. So sometimes, just leaning aggro you're kind of like leaning into the dice and just, come on, dice, bring a banana. But I was thrilled actually to see you and Jimmy do well with the hold objectives and countering, just throwing it right back in my face that like I said, I embrace the gnarlism. This is what it is, and this is how gnarlwood is. And hold objectives still went very strong. You got to have all the cards. Like, you got to have the right hold objective deck with a strong enough card pool, can still prove me wrong. And despite the meta, pull it out.
Absolutely.
I'm excited for what comes next. I don't know if Skylar has some thoughts here.
Yeah. So I thought the field was more varied than I expected, at least in champion selection. Like, super pleasantly surprised that there was only ever, at most 3 of a warband, which, meant that there was a significant showing in variety there. Only the 2 hold warbands that I'm aware of, and they were, counter meta picks, or like essentially choosing to do their own thing, regardless of the fact that the meta is bringing them aggro. I don't necessarily know, or I don't think I'd say that it was counter to an aggro playstyle per se, but it was in despite of an aggro playstyle.
Yeah, it's like when the universal card pool and the plots all favor aggro, they're not offering much support for the hold objective types. So
exactly
with Starblood and Storm of Celestis, they both have strong enough hold objective decks on their own within their faction that they could stand in a world without much support from the universal pool.
Exactly. One thing I was going to say earlier, so I'll bring it back to this, was that if you're going to lose all 3 games on the second day, lose them to the people that podium.
Yeah. You had to do it against second place, then first place, and then third place. It's pretty rough.
It's a solid strat.
It's the least my opponents could do.
Yeah, right. If you're gonna beat me, at least take home some hardware, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a really rough day too. Gotta say,
I was a little crushed that I couldn't take a single game from any of my opponents, but brilliant opponents. It wasn't. I didn't feel that. Although the dice, like, at times felt they were against me, I still felt like the play was there. Like I think really good Underworlds play and performance, we'll say like performance in a competition like this is a marriage of like really skillful play and some good luck thrown in there.
Yeah. Good luck with not only the dice, but also the card draw order.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
sometimes you can enter that flow state. I wouldn't say that I ever felt like I was in a flow state, but there was definitely with the cards, and that can. I feel like the card flow state tends to happen more in Championship, but I definitely had good experience with my Nemesis deck where, you know, it's nothing wrong with a card in your hand where it's like normally this scores, but just dictated by my opponent and how things have gone, you know, it's not going to be scoreable. But as long as every card in your deck has a place, feels good too.
Agree.
Yeah. And I was definitely feeling that all through the tournament that, you know, despite these decks being much more limited than a championship deck, things still flowed well on the whole. And all of the games felt very competitive. Like was never, there was never like, oh man, this deck is just so clunky. I can't believe, you know, this is how it's, you know, constructed. And well, I do have a preference for championship because I like the deck building.
Same.
I found it to be a really competitive experience, and it was really fun. And it felt like, you know, we're playing high level Underworlds despite having these much smaller card pools for these decks. So
I don't know if you guys know better offhand, but like I was glad to see that I was the GSP with Tooth and Claw, but Gerard had Daring Delvers. Mad Mob had two different decks. Were the Hexbanes two different decks as well?
I believe they were.
Yeah, I think
remembering.
so. I think there was a pretty good mix, and honestly, I think that Tooth and Claw was the least represented deck. I think Daring Delvers and Fearsome Fortress were really common actually at this tournament, which maybe was partially due to the fact that they had come out more recently and there was a number of new people and then people who were trying not to just lean all the way into aggro. But you know, it was a good mix. And I know people were doing a whole bunch of different things, and that bodes well, I think, for the future of other Nemesis tournaments. I don't know yet what Nova is going to be formatted, but if I had to guess,
it is Nemesis.
It will be. Okay. So yeah. Knowing how this one went, it gives me some better hope that like, hey, we can still have good tournaments, even if it's Nemesis. Like,
oh yeah, it was absolutely a good tournament.
Yeah. So to quote Davey, and this is in regards to the Dice Heroes charity tournament, he said, in the heat of the game, away from deck building, Nemesis felt like plain old Underworlds to me.
Yeah.
I echo that for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah. With all of the conversations we had with many different people throughout the tournament, I don't think I ever discussed at all the comparison between Nemesis and Championship and preferences either way, the whole tournament.
Yeah.
So it was a Nemesis tournament, right? So an audience that is showing up for Nemesis. But despite that, I was really excited to hear from many that Nemesis was the reason that they have hope in like building the game up with their friends and their circles. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so easy to get back into. And Nemesis is this accessibility push above all else to get people playing this great game that we all enjoy. So hearing so many at the tournament say that that's what they were excited about, that's why they came to this tournament, because they love this format, means it's working. I was really excited about it.
We know that there's been this big Nemesis push, and there's, I think, maybe rightly at first, and maybe it's becoming less of an issue, that, you know, from the ingrained community to be like, whoa, Championship is like the competitive way to play this game. Why isn't it that is continuing to be the through line of the game. And honestly, after a turnout like this for the 2 Nemesis tournaments we had, and the experience that I had in playing both of those tournaments, like, there's no reason we can't have both. And I think that there's an appetite for being able to play these smaller deck builded tournaments where it's like, yeah, I don't need to think too hard about it. I can just kind of take the 2 things and smash them together and go play a tournament and have a really good time. And then for folks like us, we can still fine tune a Nemesis deck despite the smaller card pool and have a great time. So I'm looking forward to having future events like Nova or LVO in next year, or any of these larger tournaments in Canada. Damien was telling me there's like 3 major tournaments in Canada that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, my opponent Jesse was also from Alberta area, and I think it's the Alberta Classic or something.
Yeah,
I've heard of it. I have to look into it.
And so I'm looking forward to all these future events where maybe we can have like a Nemesis day and a championship tournament.
A championship day. I'd love that so much.
And try and have it where like we have this accessible tournament where like almost anybody could enter because they don't need to have a huge amount of experience with the game. And then have like, okay, now, if you like that, let's level it up. Let's see if like what can you come up with when you've got this larger card pool. I think ultimately that maybe is where I would like to see things end up, is where we can have the support for the 2 levels of deck building in a single event. But regardless, like Skylar was saying, I'm happy to hear that people are coming back to the game. And if Nemesis is the thing that's doing that, then I'm all for it. And I'm super happy and would really love to see everybody who is here this year back for next year's Adepticon, plus, a handful of friends for each of them. So
let's really blow it up next year.
Yeah, I've already set it out with my wife, and we're just going to be Adepticon every year, all Adepticon. So
yeah, and until something catastrophic happens that Adepticon no longer continues, my plan.
Why would you put that into the world?
Oh, come on now, it's not going to happen. But we have waxed poetic quite a bit here about this tournament. It was super fun. As you can probably tell, we're already looking forward to the next one, and it's been a good time. But we should also probably wrap it up because we have a lot more to come in the future. We have we're going to have another tournament locally scheduled fairly soon. We haven't gotten anything on the books yet, but we've been discussing it. And then we have to play our own Trash Fire tournament, the Sleeks Bowl, if you will. So, we've got a whole lot of Underworlds coming up, and hopefully you'll all continue to join us for that journey. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get excited for this Sleeks Bowl situation.
Yeah, I've thrown a card pool together, and I'm just filtering down to 12, 10, and 10. But
yeah,
maybe I won't. Maybe I won't make it all the way to 12, 10, and 10.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe just, roll out there with 22 power cards, 24 power cards. Go crazy.
Lean into the madness.
Yeah, lean into the madness.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about with Adepticon, but I think we've talked enough.
Absolutely. We'll certainly.
I still want to talk later.
We'll still cover anything else later on. Any other final?
We still got to talk about the next season next time.
Oh man, you sure do, man. But yes,
we got to have Josh on for that.
We do. He is super excited.
Magic.
We need magic. Any other final thoughts before we sign off here, folks?
Yeah. I want to congratulate Aman on taking the tournament, and I want to congratulate the 2 of you on podiuming as well.
Thank you.
Never thought I'd do it.
Well done. Can't say that anymore.
Yeah. So for future tournaments, I am retiring Gnarl Spirit. Josh won't have to look at them ever again. Fielded by me. I don't like to double dip on something. I want to try something new afterwards. Like,
Yeah.
Dread Pageant is something, like, even if I had podiumed with Dread Pageant, I would be hanging them up. So,
Wow.
on to
That's
the next
saying
one.
something.
I love them, and I don't know. I'm all alight with excitement for whatever a Dread Pageant 2.0 might look like after seeing Weird Hollow.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Can't talk about that yet.
There is something satisfying with grabbing a victory with a warband like that, though, and saying, "All right, you've done it." Like, you kind of graduate them and just cement that milestone for yourself.
Yeah,
get the veteran treatment. They can have their rest now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us today. It's been a long one again. Thanks for sticking with us through this one. I'm sure, hopefully you had as much fun as we did recapping all of this. We had all this excitement, all this energy from just coming back from the tournament. If you'd like to let us know about that or any other thoughts on anything that we covered today, you can reach us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like, you can head on over to themortalrealms.com. We can check out our blog and all the other shows in the Mortal Realms podcast group, which is covering Warcry and the stories of the Mortal Realms. As I mentioned earlier, coming up next, we will likely be doing something with the Sleeks Bowl Bowl / Trashfire tournament, although we do have Weird Hollow to talk about, so maybe we'll slot something in there. But to be determined. Keep your eyes peeled here. Boys, are you ready for a Flavitext quiz?
Hit me.
Absolutely.
All right. So I got one pulled out here. Because there's not a specific warband to focus on for today, I will let you know that it is from one of the most recent releases, so that it narrows this pool a little bit. And it is somewhat
confident it was going to be from Starblood Stalkers.
I thought about it, but that's potentially a pretty deep cut. It's going back a ways. So, and I felt like the name of this card was fitting for what happened at Adepticon. So it's not over until we say so. This does have a attributed fighter, but I will save that unless you need another clue.
I want to say Arena.
Yeah, so we're in Arena territory.
Yep.
All right. It can't be attributed to Traxia, because I remember most of her attributions, I think. Hopefully I'm not going to eat that. Brian, you almost played these.
I almost played them, but I haven't studied them since I realized they were coming out too close to Adepticon. I wasn't going to be able to get them painted in time. But then Slim Jim showed me up on that. He showed up with them.
He did a very good job painting them too.
He did. I'm cooked. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one was from Thriala the Lash, and this is Bloody Show.
Oh, all right.
The very bloody show, indeed.
Very nice.
All right.
Very nice.
And for your recommended listening today, we will have, I believe it is The Summit by Avi Kaplan. Going back to Avi, this one felt appropriate for the tournament. The Summit from his initial album. It's pretty fun. Little piece about climbing the summit, as we just did at Adepticon. But for What the Hex, I've been Phil.
I've been Brian.
And I've been Skylar.
Oh, and I got to mute Discord.
Yes, please.
Magic.
Magic.